wearing a tie because I'm going to talk about playing real book gigs. My second video in the series, in my playlist, the business of making music, was about getting in the game. And I listed a bunch of, very quickly listed, a bunch of different jobs that I have done in the business to keep my foot in the door of the music business somehow, some way. And I didn't put up there, I just put jazz gigs or played jazz gigs. And there's a specific type of gig called a real book gig. And musicians, working musicians, especially jazz musicians, knows what that means. But basically a real book is kind of the first legitimate fake book. And I actually have, what I've done is taken a bunch of real books, because what happens is they come out with a new real book every, I don't know, 7-8 years or so, and the standards will be in there, but there'll be a whole bunch of new songs in there. So what I did was I kind of combined 3 real books together into one big giant folder. And you can see all my yellow tabs here. Those are all like songs that I can kind of play by myself if I have to. All of Me is the very first one in there. And you can see basically it would require some reading ability. You need to know chords, harmony, and you need to know how to read melodies. And the standards, if you know them, you don't need to. You may not need to read them if you know them, or if you have a very good ear and a good memory for those. But you also need to be able to improvise, most likely. Now, if you're a guitar player in this situation, you might not have to. If you're playing with a sax player, a trumpet player, or something like that, or a piano player, they can take all the soloing work, but ultimately they're going to want you're going to want to be able to kind of improvise. That's part of the gig. And so basically how a real book gig works is everybody shows up with their real book and they say, hey, let's play All of Me, and they will, you'll play the head down. Say you've got a quartet. Say you've got guitar, bass, drums, and a sax player. I've done a lot of real book gigs with that lineup. And so we play the head down. I'll play chords. And the bass player's doing his. Bass player's playing his thing, and the drummer's doing his brushes or whatever. And the sax player will play the melody. Then typically what happens is we'll play all the way through the song, and then we'll play all the way through the song again with someone soloing over it, say the sax player. And then we'll play it again with me soloing, and then maybe a bass solo, and maybe a drum solo, and then you go back to the head. So you may play the tune down with a 4-piece, you may play it down 5 or 6 times. Maybe not every time, and you can also double it if you want, like take 2 times through or whatever. That's especially on a faster song, you might do it 2 or 3 times through. And so basically what that allows you to do is just, everybody knows the format. You don't need to talk about it in advance. And it's pretty much going to be the same on every song you do out of the real book. You're going to play the head down, and then people are going to take solos, and then you're going to play the head down again, and that's it. Now here's the crazy thing about this. The crazy thing about the real book gig is that you can do a quartet with 4 players that you've never worked with before, and they've never worked with anybody else in there. I've gotten real book calls for gigs where I show up and none of the 4 of us have ever worked together at all. And it's funny because people will come up and say, wow, how long have you been a band? And we look at our watches and we're like, well, since noon. Because that's often the case. Everybody has a real book. They have the same book. They can call the same tunes. They're all in the same key. This is the C. So if you're a guitar player, you're going to want to get the C version. I'll put a link down there so you can check it out. And then basically you can do it. I've done it as a trio. I could do it with a guitar, bass, and drums. It's a little tougher because I'm going to have to carry the melody and maybe the chords at the same time. Right? Kind of like I was doing in the intro there. All right? And that requires a little bit more knowledge. I've done real book gigs by myself where I'm doing this, kind of like Joe Pass. I'm also going to create a Spotify playlist with a bunch of solo jazz guitars, so you can kind of get a sense of what that would sound like. But some of the greats through the years, I can put those on the playlist, and I'll probably put some trios in there too, so you can hear what a guitar with bass and drums might do in this kind of scenario. But I'll limit the playlist to to standards, tunes that would probably be in the real book. So you can kind of get a sense for it. Now, when I was a kid, when I was in junior high, I was trying to put together a band, and I just couldn't find any bands to play in when I was in junior high. Well, I was 9th grade, 10th grade in high school. So I decided I was going to just play by myself and do, So I started to learn a bunch of solo jazz guitar things that I would just do the arrangements myself. I may do a video in the future for Pro Guitar Secrets of how to do an arrangement of, combine chords, bass notes, and melodies all into one guitar part. I may talk about that in the future, but basically a real book gig is a great way to make some extra coin. You can make, $100 a gig up to $500 a gig. It just depends. Every city, every area of the world has opportunities for small jazz combos to play music, whether it be weddings or I got kind of in the thing doing gallery openings, which is crazy, and museum events. And those were great because oftentimes the view from my office, so to speak, would be amazing. So I'd be looking at the ocean while I'm playing, playing All of Me. So anyway, this is just another way you can make a living in the music business, and so check it out. It's a good possibility if you've already got some chops in the jazz arena, and pick up the real book because it'll give you a huge encyclopedia of songs that you can learn. And I may even put a list in the comments or include a PDF at some point of a list of songs, the standards you should start with, rather than work your way through. Because there's a lot of books in here, there's a lot of songs in here that are, crazy kind of fusion jazz things that no one recognizes, and they're probably not going to want to hear. They're fun to play, but they're probably not going to be much for, there's not going to be much demand for those at your real book gig, at your museum opening. Okay, so I hope you're doing well. God bless you. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you.